So one day I ran outside and saw a watermelon, so I ran to it. I picked it up and then ran it back to my house to open it up the only way I knew how, with rubber bands. I put some rubber bands on it and then I got a sheet for when it breaks. And then I continued placing rubber bands on it with the help of my brother, and it was starting to actually work. I kept doing it, and then my brother drew a face on it.
Henry!
And then we just kept going until eventually we ran out of good rubber bands. So I was left with no choice but to run out in the rain, get in my car, and drive to Walmart. I got there, got my rubber bands, and then headed back home to get back to placing them. And eventually I could even see the indentation in the watermelon. And then I actually predicted it.
It's gonna bust.
When?
Any second.
Oh, God.
I just know it.
Instant replay. And it left this wad of rubber bands, like for me to turn it into a rubber band ball, part 2. Part 2, putting rubber bands on a watermelon. So it exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands. So I decided to turn it into a rubber band ball with all the leftover rubber bands. I began by making the wad a lot neater, and I discovered this.
There's watermelon inside this.
So I did my best to get it out and then kept making it neater, and then eventually started placing actual rubber bands on it. And after a while, I took a break to go shoot some hoops with it. And let's just say it's not a basketball, and I ended up breaking my backboard more than it was already. And then I waited till the next day at like 2 in the morning to start trying to place more rubber bands on it. I finished my pile and started placing another bag, and eventually I was down to the last one. And to be honest, it was a lot of time for very little difference, but I got another bag anyway and started placing them. I finished it up and I had a ball, I guess. Let me know if I should even keep doing this. Part 3 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands. So I turned it into this actual rubber band ball, and now we're here and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. I got some rubber bands and then went home and emptied them out and opened up a bag. And got busy. But after a little bit I left and then came back the next day. And finished off the pile. And then I dumped out 2 more bags and started placing them. But I got bored and ended up leaving and coming back again the next day to finish it all off. I placed rubber bands forever, and then I went outside to test it out on my broken hoop. Yeah, it was hard to play with, but it bounced really high. Here's it next to a basketball. Yeah. After that, I went back inside to finish off the pile, and then I dumped out another 2 bags and started placing rubber bands for what felt like an eternity. And I was finally down to the last bag. I put them all on, and I was done. And it's pretty big, but it's going to take like 1 million likes for me to keep going. Part 4 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands, and I've been adding a lot of rubber bands to it. And I said it would take 1 million likes for me to keep going, and it got 4 million. So I went to Walmart, got more rubber bands, and then left, went home, set them down, and opened them up. And then the next day, I got on that rubber band grind, placing the entire pile on the ball. And when I was done, I left and came back again later to place another bag on. And once I finished that ball, it was pretty big, like the size of my head. I weighed it, and it weighed 5 pounds. And it also bounced pretty high, and made a decent basketball for my broken hoop. And after that, my brother wanted to play some bands, so I let him. But he gave up, and I ended up having to finish his pile off. And after that, I only had 1 more big pile left, so I dumped it all out and started placing them. I finished it up and then started on the bag of thicker rubber bands. And now I'm out. This sucked a lot, and since the last post got like 4 million likes, it's going to take like 5 million likes now for me to keep going. So one day I decided to see how much a pawn shop would give me for my rubber band ball. So I got in my car and drove out to one, but it was closed for another 30 minutes. So I waited, ate a burrito, and then went back in and said,
I got this rubber band ball.
Okay.
I want to sell for $200.
Why do you think it's worth $200?
I put a lot of time into it. It's a lot of rubber bands,
How many rubber bands are in there?
like 14 bags.
How many is in a bag?
I have no idea. But it weighs 6.5 pounds.
Wow, does it bounce? Wow, bounces pretty good. Well, how old are you?
16.
You gotta be 18 before you can do anything with
and then he said he'd give me $100 for it if I counted all the rubber bands and had someone 18 sell it for me. So I thought about it and said,
200.
No, I can't go 200 on it, but that'd be worth just watching you count that many rubber bands for $100.
500.
I couldn't get $500 out of a rubber ball.
How much do you think you could sell this for?
$50.
I'm gonna have to walk.
All right, appreciate you coming in.
so then I walked out with my rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to have to keep adding bands. Part 5 of making a giant rubber band ball. So I've been making this rubber band ball, and I ran out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. Got a bunch more rubber bands, and then I went home, dumped 2 bags out, put some gloves on so I didn't break my skin again, and started placing the bands. And then left and came back the next day to finish off the pile. It looked pretty good so far, and then I forgot to video placing a whole nother bag. But it looks like this, and then I dumped out all the colored rubber bands and started placing them all on the rubber band ball. And I was done, and it was almost the size of my head and weighed 8.2 pounds. And bounced pretty high. And also made a decent basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 8.2 pounds, but I want it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, then emptied out 2 bags of colored rubber bands, and got busy placing the entire pile. And after I finished the colored rubber bands, I dumped out 3 bags of normal rubber bands and placed that. I placed a bunch, but then left and came back the next day to place some more. It got tiring, and I placed a lot of rubber bands, so I left, took another break, and came back and started on it again. I was sure to place the whole bag this time, but I got too tired and had to leave and come back again the next day to finish it off. So that's what I did, and I finished it up. And it was done. It weighed 10 pounds, was bigger than my head, and bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going. So one day I wanted to see what all I could crush with rubber bands. So I went to Walmart and got a water gun, rubber bands, some Dr. Pepper, and a jug of water. Then I left and went home. I dumped out 2 bags of rubber bands, shook up the 2-liter, and started placing a lot of rubber bands on it. And then I just decided to go throw it because I was scared it was going to blow up. So I threw it and it didn't do anything. So I went and I tried again. And this time, it kind of worked. And it looked like this. And after that, I started on the water jug, alternating with my brother because it was kind of tiring. And eventually, I started messing with the cap and accidentally made it come off. I was shocked. I drank some, and then I left and went inside to start on the water gun. I placed a bunch of bands on it and then realized it'd never break and left. Part 7 of making a rubber band ball. So I've been making this ball, and it's pretty giant now and weighs 10 pounds. But I wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put my gloves on, and first finished off the pile of normal rubber bands that was already on the table. And once I was done with that, I dumped out all the bags of colored rubber bands and began placing them. I did this for quite a while, and the ball was finished, and it was huge. And it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is almost the size of a basketball. And it also bounces pretty high. And I also shot it in the hoop. And now I'm officially finished with it. It looks pretty cool. So one day I decided to take my 12.9 pound rubber band ball and see how high it would bounce off a building. But first in the street and then in the hoop. And then I got a ladder and climbed up to the roof of my house with the ball to throw it off. I threw it off and it bounced pretty high and went into the yard. And then I tried to go up even higher to throw it off and just dropped the ball and almost took out my brother. And then I went down so I didn't fall off. I put the ball in my car and took it to a parking garage to throw it off that. I walked up there and tossed the ball off. Yeah, it bounced pretty high. And then I went back up all cinematic with the ball, ran around, and then I fell. But I got back up, took my ball to the edge and bounced it off. And then celebrated. Full vid will be on my YouTube. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is the size of a basketball. And I was going to stop, but everyone wanted me to keep going, so I went to Walmart, got some more bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, and got back at it. I started by placing the pile of colored rubber bands because it's easier to place, and once I was done with that, I weighed it, and it was 12.9 pounds, and still bounced pretty high, and made a good basketball. Then I went to Walmart to get more colored rubber bands, but they were out, so I just got the normal ones and went home, dumped that out, and placed that entire pile. I finished it off, and it was now 13.4 pounds, and still the size of a basketball, and still bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going and just see how big I can make it. Rubber band ball part 9. So a lot of people don't know that it started when this watermelon exploded and left me with this wad of rubber bands. And ever since then, I've just been adding on to it, and this is the entire compilation up until now. And I needed more colored rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, but they were out. So I got gas and went to a different Walmart. But they were out too, so I went to another one, and they finally had some. Then I went home, dumped out a bag, and then got busy placing the entire pile of rubber bands until I was done. And then I left and came back later. I dumped out the colored rubber bands and placed that entire pile. Then I found some more rubber bands in the floor, placed those, and then placed a bag of thicker rubber bands that I also found in the floor. And I was done. It now weighs 14.7 pounds, is the size of my head, and bounces pretty high. And it's also bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it's pretty big now, but everyone wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart to get more bands, but they were out, so I went to a different Walmart and got some. Then went home, set down a pile of bands, and got busy placing the entire thing until it was done. And then I dumped out a few more bags and first placed the bag of smaller rubber bands and then the bags of thicker rubber bands until I was done with that. And it now weighs nearly 16 pounds and still bounces pretty high, but it's hard to catch now. And it makes a decent basketball. Like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball and people seem to never want me to stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, and then went home to start placing them. I dumped out the little bags first and began placing all of those until I was done, which took a while. Then I left and came back later to place all of the colored rubber bands, which took even longer, but now it looks pretty. I left again and came back to place the last bag of thicker rubber bands, and it was finally done. And it now weighs 17.5 pounds, is bigger than my head, and is pretty hard to catch when you bounce it. And now it's noticeably bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to continue this ball. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and to be honest, at this point I'll probably never stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then left, went home, dumped out all the colored rubber bands, and began placing them. Until I was done with the entire pile, which took a while. But I did it, then took a break and came back later to start on the pile of normal rubber bands. And I placed that entire pile covering all the colored rubber bands. So sad. Then took another break, came back and dumped out all the thicker rubber bands and began placing them until I was out. And the ball now weighs 19.2 pounds and is a lot harder to throw and way harder to make a basket with. Yeah, it's pretty big, so like if you want me to keep going. Back.
For me?
Oh yeah, it's a rubber ball. Oh, it's bigger. How many bands is it now?
I don't know. I brought some more items too. I made this in junior high, a one-of-a-kind CO2 car.
Did you win?
No.
Oh, it's a loser card.
He then looked at it and didn't want to buy it. So I showed him
This is
this.
a can of air.
It's about empty though.
Oh, I used it a little bit.
And I said it was worth,
$50.
and he said no, so I showed him the next item.
I found this at an abandoned race car track. A genuine gold cup.
Then he asked why I thought it was gold.
It looks gold.
And he even tested it and found out it was stainless steel, so I brought out the rubber band ball.
It's probably the most famous rubber band ball you'll ever see. Its intrinsic value, probably $5,000.
How'd you come up with that value?
I just did.
He didn't want to buy it, but he gave me the good idea to put it on eBay.
Like eBay.
It's a neat idea. I might do that.
So then I left. Let me know if you think I should put it on eBay. So I've been making this rubber band ball for way longer than I thought I'd be, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and they were out of rubber bands, so I left and came back a few days later and they had some. I went home, dumped them all out into a pile, and started placing them. And it's honestly just so satisfying to watch the pile go down. And when I was done, I left and came back later with a new bag that I ordered on Amazon. And the band seemed good, so I placed the entire pile until I was done. And it now weighs 23.6 pounds, is way bigger than my head, and it's really hard to throw, and even harder to make a basket with. But I made one. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep adding rubber bands every time Walmart restocks. So I went there, got a few more bags of colored rubber bands, then went home and started with the 2 bags I ordered on Amazon. I placed the entire pile until you couldn't see a colored rubber band in sight. And then I left and came back later to place the colored rubber bands I got at Walmart. And I placed it until I was done. It's huge and now weighs almost 26 pounds, is super hard to throw and really hard to catch, but I can still make a basket with it and even stand on it now. Well, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So as you probably know, I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I needed more rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. But they were out of the ones I needed, so I went to a different Walmart, and they had some. Then I went home, dumped them all out, and got busy. And sped up, this all just looks really cool. Anyway, I finished that pile and took a break and came back later to finish this bag I ordered. And sadly, it's a lot less colorful now. But I'm done, and it now weighs 28.3 pounds and bounces decently. And I also made a basket. Like if I should keep going. So as you know, I have this giant rubber band ball, but now I want to make a little rubber band ball to show you how. I first wadded up a clump of bands and then wrapped them around each other until I had this. And then I started doubling up bands and adding them to the clump for a while until I had this. And after that, I just kept on going until I got to this. And it's pretty neat and bouncy. I went on for quite a while after this until it looked like this. And it's pretty cool and weighs a lot less than my other one, weighing 0, and this one weighing 28. And it's not even close to the size of my head. Here's me throwing the big one, and now here's me throwing the small one. Now a basket with the small one, a basket with the big one, eventually. And throwing the big one, and throwing the small one. I had to run after it. Yeah, they're both pretty cool. So one day I got this comment that said to throw my rubber band ball off a hill, so I put it in my car and drove on out to a hill. I got out and carried it on up the hill, which was hard because it weighs 30 pounds, and I got to the top and threw it off. And it bounced and bounced and then started rolling, and it started bouncing again towards the bottom and went on out into the parking lot and just kept on going. And eventually I had to chase after it and jump over a fence and I had it. And then we went back up the hill to try it again from this angle. And it went on down pretty steady, and then it looked like it was going to hit my car. And I got kind of nervous, so I started to chase after it. But it barely missed it and just went on out into the field. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball for quite a while now, and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, and they had so many colored rubber bands. I got them and then went back to carry even more and then left. I went home and started with this pack I ordered, and I placed the entire pile. And done. And then I took a break and came back later with all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and got busy placing them for what felt like an eternity, because this is probably the biggest pile I've ever placed. And it's huge. It now weighs 30 pounds, is way bigger than my head, is pretty hard to throw, and almost impossible to make a basket with, and I can even stand on it. Like if you think I should keep going. So this is part 18 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and got like 9 packs of colored rubber bands, then left, went home, and dumped them all out into a giant pile, and got busy placing them. And I placed the entire pile, which took quite a while. And then I left and took a break and came back later with this bag. I dumped it out and placed that entire pile. And eventually I was done. And it weighs a lot. It's bigger than my head. It's pretty hard to make a basket with. I can stand on it and really hard to throw. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm back at it again with the rubber band ball, and I need more rubber bands again. So I went to Walmart and counted out like 12 packs of rubber bands in the floor, and then grabbed them all and went home. And I first started with the pack I ordered on Amazon to match the surface of the ball. And after I was done with that, I took a break and came back later to place all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and then began placing them for quite a while until I was done. And the scale said it weighed 39 pounds, so I double checked on another one and it said the same thing. It's really hard to throw and officially impossible to make a basket with now, but I can stand on it, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm now to part 20 of this, which is crazy, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home and dumped them all out into a pile. And then I got busy placing them until I was done with that pile. Then I got the 2 packs I ordered, dumped them all out into a pile, and began placing them until the ball was finished. And it now weighs an astounding 42 pounds. It is very hard to bounce now, and its basketball days are just over. But I am getting better at standing on it, so that's cool. Like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now on part 21 of this rubber band ball, and no one ever seems to want me to stop, so I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had. Then I went home and started out with the bag I ordered on Amazon, and I placed that entire pile. And then I took a break, as usual, and came back to place all the colored rubber bands. And I dumped them all out into a pile, and then placed it all, which took quite a while, but I finished, and it now weighs 45 pounds. Could probably take me out, and I broke my already broken basketball goal with it. But hey, I can stand on it. And like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 22 of this, and everyone just wants more, and more. So I went to Walmart and bought more. I bought all the packs of colored rubber bands I could carry, and then I went home and dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot. And then I got busy placing all the bands, which took so long I almost quit. But I didn't, and it's done and now weighs 48 pounds. And it's like 3 times the size of my head and can even crush a can of Flex Seal. Wow. And I'm also able to fully balance on it now, like if I should keep on going. So one day I wanted to see what all I could destroy from dropping my band ball up high. So I went to Walmart, got a chair, a Hot Wheel, a lot of Diet Coke, a container, and a watermelon. Then I went home, set up a ladder, and dropped the Diet Coke, and it did nothing. So I threw it, and then I dropped the band ball in another bottle. And when that failed, I shook it up and did it again. And it worked. And then my brother threw me one that I dropped. And after that, I decided to crush the Hot Wheel, and it held up pretty well. And then I dropped the 21-pound ball on the bin, and it did the most damage so far. But not enough. And after that was this tiny chair thing that got kind of broken, and I fell. Next, we dropped it on a water gun, and a piece came off. Then I shook the rest of the Diet Coke up and knocked them over, and then threw them all, one by one. And all this destroying was a lot like this game I've been playing where you drop and smash random stuff. Click the link in my bio if you want to download it. And lastly was the watermelon, and it got crushed. And I even ate some pounds and could hurt someone. So I took it to this abandoned race car track, took it to the second story, and dropped it. And it bounced and then just rolled into the ground. And I was like, I gotta do something else. So I went down to this pipe and I'm like, can I put it in there? So I looked and it just gradually got smaller. So my ball would have got stuck. Glad I didn't do that. But I just ended up throwing it off and it bounced off into the fence. And it got this mark on it. Oh well, let me know what else I should do with my rubber band ball. So one day someone commented for me to drop my rubber band ball in glass. So I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of different glass items, then went home, laid out a tarp, and started with this glass vase. I set it down, then got the rubber band ball and threw it on it. And here's the slow-mo. It completely shattered and tore rubber bands off my rubber band ball. Yeah, I didn't expect that much, so I got this more solid piece of glass, laid it down, and crushed it. And here's that slow-mo. It was obliterated as well, and knocked a bunch more bands off. My ball is pretty mutilated. I washed some of the glass off, and there was a glass piece stuck in it. Comment what else I should try. So I'm now all the way to part 27 of my rubber band ball, and I need more bands, so I ordered these big rubber bands and started placing them. And these bands are really hard to place, so this was really exhausting. So I took a break and then came back later to place these colored rubber bands and make it look good. I placed the entire pile and it now weighs 65 pounds. I let it roll out to the cul-de-sac, picked it up, threw it down, then tried to stand on it, then threw it again, and then my brother tried to stand on it. And like, if you want me to keep on going. So one day someone commented that I should cover my rubber band ball in Flex Seal, and seeing as I broke it and it needed a little bit of fixing because there's glass shards on it, I thought, why not? So I rolled it out to my yard and started spraying it. I sprayed all around it until it was done. Actually, I gave it a little bit more and then let it sit. And the next day I came back and it had rained, but it was still solid compared to the side that wasn't Flex Seal. I picked it up and took it out to the cul-de-sac and it bounced the same and was just kind of stale. I rolled it into the basketball goal. Boom. Then stood on it, and let me know what else I should do. So it's now to part 28 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I ordered more rubber bands. I dumped them out and placed them. And when I was finished with that, I got out these garbage bag rubber bands that I ordered that are also pretty colorful. And then I placed another pile of those ones. And it now weighs 68 pounds. I took it downstairs, out to the yard, into the cul-de-sac, and look at it next to a basketball. Ordinary basketball and hoop. Rubber band ball and hoop. Tossing basketball, tossing band ball. But I can stand on this one, like if you want me to keep on going. So one day I went out to a pumpkin patch to get the biggest pumpkin they had. When I walked up, I saw a dog and thought it was nice, but it barked at me. So I just went along, looked at the pumpkins, and here was the biggest ones, the biggest being 30 pounds. But it wasn't actually, because this one weighed 45 pounds. I looked around at the other pumpkins and ended up getting this one and the giant 45-pound one. I put it in the car and then went home to think about what I was going to do with it. I had 4 ideas: carve it, put it on my head, destroy it with the rubber band ball, or blow it up. And I ended up destroying some other pumpkins with the rubber band ball. Slow motion. And then I put it on as a hat. So like if you want me to blow this pumpkin up, or comment what else you want me to do with it. So it's now part 29 of this rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to keep going. I ordered another box of these thick rubber bands and put the whole pile on my ball. I then took a break and came back later to place all these colored rubber bands that are also supposed to be garbage bag rubber bands. I placed the entire pile and it was done. And it's now 72 pounds. I rolled it downstairs, outside, and into the cul-de-sac. Here it is in comparison to my head, and here's me trying to throw it. And look, the basketball hoop fell over, but I can stand on it. And like if you want me to keep on going. So one day I got a comment that said I should launch my giant rubber band ball and my giant slingshot, so I pulled it back and it did that, as expected. But I also have this little rubber band ball that I pulled back and launched. It went pretty far, and then I launched it in my brother. Right there. And after that, I launched this pool noodle, and then launched it at my brother, but missed that. And then I got this GoPro and decided to launch it with the camera on. I pulled it back, and here's the camera's angle. It spun all around and hit the ground. I found it, and it was still okay, so I tried it again. And this angle was pretty cool. There's my brother picking it up. So I've learned these things are pretty tough, and comment what else I should launch. So one day I decided to take my giant 70-pound rubber band ball to an abandoned water park to throw it down a giant water slide. I walked around trying to figure out where the slide dropped off and figured out it dropped off right over there. So I went down there to make sure it was retrievable, and it seemed doable. So I got the rubber band ball, took it up a bunch of stairs, and it was ready to go. On down this old abandoned slide. But first I wanted to try out this little one. So my brother went down there to film, and I threw the ball. And it went pretty fast, so I kind of lost track, but it went all the way down and out. My brother picked it up, and then I was ready to send the big one down. And I pushed it off, and it went down pretty hard and was making a lot of noise. It went around the curve, and then I could see it going through the tunnels. It was going really fast and started making even more noise, so some people started yelling. But despite that, the ball prevailed on and went all the way out. And here's my brother's perspective. That was cool. And then I lugged my rubber band ball home. So I've been making this rubber band ball for a long time, and it's now part 30. And I ordered another pack of these big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And after I was done with that, I got the pile of even more of these big colored rubber bands than I did last time. And when I was done with that, the ball was looking pretty good at 76 pounds. I took it out to the street, picked it up, and threw it the best I could, and then tried again. And I ended up just laying on it and then standing on it. So, like, if you want me to keep on going. All right. So I'm now to part 31 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I got another package. I dumped out this pack of pretty big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And then, like I did last time, got a bunch of these colored garbage bag rubber bands and placed them all. And these ones placed pretty good. I finished, and the ball now weighs 81 pounds. I took it downstairs and out to the cul-de-sac, where I compared it to my head, and then got up and tried to throw it. And then I tried to throw it behind me, and then stood on it. And even tried to ramp it, but just broke the ramp. So, like, if you want me to keep going, and comment any ideas you have for it. So one day someone commented for me to try to trade my rubber band ball with the pawn shop again. So I put it in my car, and this would be my third time going. I walked in and said,
I'm back.
Hey, what's happening, Dylan?
I actually have this new ball.
I showed him my new aluminum foil ball first, and he said,
Pretty neat. You from getting an alien invasion.
I was thinking this thing is started it, so it's probably not gonna be worth a ton. $300.
and he kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and then asked how many rolls of aluminum foil were in it. So I told him 6, and then he asked how much weight, and I didn't know. So I had him weigh it, and it wouldn't register.
How much did you spend on the foil?
About like 24.
And he passed, so I threw it down and got the rubber band ball.
Almost 80 pounds, and is the most famous rubber band ball in the world, probably, maybe.
That's massive.
He picked it up and then asked how much I'd sell it to him for. And I thought for a second and then highballed him at 25 grand.
1,000? Wow.
And he said his shop could probably only sell it for.
$100.
So I knew we had no deal. I had to pass. I got some candy and then went out the door. And the ball almost went in the street. Let me know any other ideas you have. So now to part 32 of this rubber band ball, and I'm probably never stopping, honestly. I bought another one of these packages, put it in a pile, and placed it. And then I got out all the colored rubber bands that are actually meant for garbage cans. And I placed that entire pile as well, and the ball now weighs 84 pounds. And I took it out to the street, and because my wrist is kind of hurt, I couldn't really pick it up, but here's it next to a basketball, and then we walked off together in the sunset, like if I should keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 33 of this giant rubber band ball, which is insane. And I got another box. I placed this entire pile of rubber bands, which wasn't that bad, and then dumped out all these colored garbage bag rubber bands. I had them in a nice pile and then placed them all one by one until I was out. And it now weighs over 90 pounds. I took it out to the cul-de-sac and tried the best I could to pick it up and throw it. And then I stood on it, and this time I actually didn't fall off it. I jumped, and here it is next to my head, and here it is rolling. Like if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 34 of this giant rubber band ball. And it's getting kind of redundant, but I'm going to try to keep it interesting. I ordered these bands, placed them on, you know. Then I got the other pile, which is these colored rubber bands that I actually have to untie first and then place them on the ball. And after placing this entire pile, it now weighs almost 95 pounds. I struggled to make it out to the cul-de-sac. And it's so heavy it even picked up grass. Then I picked it up and threw it, and look at it in freeze frame. Look how big it is. It's so big, there's really not much you can even do with it. Here's it next to a basketball. Here's it crushing one and then falling off. And then me trying to stand on it but failing and crushing the basketball goal. So, like if I should keep on going or comment what I should do. So one day someone commented for me to put rubber bands on an egg, and I thought it'd be interesting to test out to see if the bands would protect it from a drop. I started placing the bands on the egg and then switched to a different pile because their bands were better. I kept placing them, double twisting each band because they weren't big enough. It got to this, and then I finished off the pile, and it looked like this. Pretty bouncy. And it was ready for a drop test. I took it out to the cul-de-sac and dropped it from waist high. And yeah, it completely cracked. I didn't really expect that, to be honest. I picked it up, let it go, and then walked off sad. Like if I should do something else. One day someone commented to put Flex Seal and then rubber bands on the egg. So I'm going to do that and also launch it in my giant Slingshot. But first I Flex Sealed it and then came back and gave it another coat. And after that, I left and came back the next day and gave it another coat. When it was dry, it looked like this. Then I gave it one last coat, and it was ready. And it was still kind of wet, but I placed a bunch of bands on it, and it looked like this. Then I placed a bunch more bands on it, and it looked like that. Then I got on another pile, placed it on, it looked like that. Then I got out these big ones, and it looked like that. Then I put it in the Slingshot, pulled back, and launched. And it hit the ground pretty hard. I ran to check if the egg was okay, and it was leaking. It wasn't. So it's now part 35 of my giant rubber band ball, and I decided to change up the scenery a little bit. I dumped out a whole box of rubber bands of different kinds. I started by dumping these colored garbage bag rubber bands into a pile and putting these gloves on so I don't hurt my fingers, and putting all the rubber bands on, and this happened. Right into my eye socket. And it hurt, but I kept on going because the rubber band ball wasn't going to make itself. I finished off all these colored ones and then dumped out these purple ones that I ended up not using because they were kind of trash. I got out these ones instead and placed the entire pile. And I was done and exhausted. The ball is almost 100 pounds now, and it's a pretty big struggle to get downstairs. Took it out to the street and barely picked it up. Yeah, it's getting pretty hard to throw now, so I just sit on it and stand on it. Like if you want me to keep on going to 100. So one day someone commented for me to crush the aluminum foil ball with my giant rubber band ball, and I'm going to do that, but first I wanted to add some more aluminum foil. I wrapped it one way and then the other with a lot of foil, and then I patted it down, and then I hammered it down. And it's almost 15 pounds. Here it is next to the rubber band ball. And here's me throwing as high as I can. And now for crushing it. And then I flipped it on the other side and crushed it again. It didn't do that much damage. It was pretty tough. Comment what I should do next. So I'm now all the way to part 36 of this giant rubber band ball. And let me know if you want to stop, but for now I'm going to keep going. So I got this new pack and, placed that entire pile on the ball, which was pretty exhausting. So I took a break, then came back later with all these colored rubber bands that I dumped into a pile and placed on the rubber band ball. And I was done. And it might have broke the scale because it reads 102 and 103. So, I don't know. Then I took it downstairs, struggling. I rolled it off into the yard and into the road. And just look at this ball in comparison to my head. It's massive. And it's getting pretty hard to lift and throw. And like, if you want me to keep going or just cut it in half. So one day it was snowing outside and I decided I wanted to build a giant snowman and destroy it with my giant 100-pound rubber band ball. So I started with a snowball and it got bigger and bigger till eventually we had our base. We cleaned it up a little bit and then I rolled around another snowball until I had the midsection. Put it on, smoothed it out, and then put on the head. We smoothed out the rest and gave it arms and a chain and turned him into Drippy Steve the Snowman. Hey, icy. Then I filled up my super powerful water gun with hot tub water and blew a hole in his face. And then supercharged his nose off. And after that, I got out the giant rubber band ball, picked it up, and threw it at his head. And he was pretty wrecked. Here's me pretending I'm a snowman, and then the rubber band ball going past and being on him and throwing it at his back. But none of it worked, so I threw this thing at him and then jumped into him. But he was too solid. Let me know what else I should try.